What would you do if your own sister betrayed you, stole everything your grandmother left for you, and then laughed in your face? Would you fight back? Would you let it go? Or would you make sure she paid for every bit of what she did? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And trust me, the way this ends, you won't see it coming. Growing up, my grandmother's house was more than just a place to live. It was home. It smelled like old books and lavender, the wooden floors creaked in the same spots every time, and the tiny kitchen, way too small for big family dinners, was still the heart of the house. Every summer, my sister Claire and I spent hours in that kitchen, baking cookies with Grandma, listening to stories about the good old days. It was our safe place, the one constant in our lives. And then Claire stole it from me. Not just the house, the memories, the security, the last real piece of our family. She didn't tell me. She didn't ask. She sold it behind my back and kept every single dollar for herself. I only found out when I went back to visit, expecting to step into the place I grew up in, only to find out it was no longer ours. Someone else had bought it. Someone else was moving in. I called Claire, demanding answers. I thought there had to be a mistake. But there wasn't. She didn't even try to soften the blow. She just smirked at me like this was all some kind of joke. "Oh, you thought we were gonna decide together?" she said, crossing her arms. "That's cute. But Grandma made me the executor of the will. I sold the house. And by the way, you'll never see a single cent." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. This wasn't just a house. It was our history, our childhood, the place that held every memory of Grandma. The one place in the world that ever truly felt like home. And she sold it without even telling me. Without giving me a chance to keep it. She didn't even care. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much this meant to me. But she just stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was some kind of fool for caring. And maybe I was stupid for thinking she'd ever care about anything other than herself. I tried to move on. I told myself, it's just a house. Just walls. Just a roof. That's it. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. And Claire? She was busy showing off her new life. Posting pictures of shopping sprees, expensive vacations, fancy dinners. Living her best life with the money she stole from me. I stopped talking to her. She didn't care. She had what she wanted. And then one night I got a call. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick up. "Hey, is this your name?" "Yeah, who's this?" "My name's Mark. I just bought your grandmother's house." For a second I couldn't even speak. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Then Mark continued. "Listen, I found something in the attic. And I think you need to come over." I frowned. "What is it?" There was a pause. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. "I think it changes everything." I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove straight there. The whole way my mind was racing. What could he have found? Why did it matter? The house was gone, sold, signed off, done. What else was left? But deep down I knew. Claire never played fair. She was always one step ahead, always had some scheme running. And something told me, this was about to be the biggest one yet. When I pulled up in front of the house, it didn't feel like home anymore. The porch light was on, but the windows were dark. Everything about it felt different. Mark was waiting for me at the door. "I wasn't sure if I should call you," he said, leading me inside. "But once I found this, I figured you'd want to see it." He took me upstairs to the attic, the one place Claire never liked going. It was dusty, filled with old furniture, boxes stacked to the ceiling. And then, in the far corner, under a moth-eaten blanket, was an old wooden trunk. The lid was already open. Inside, wrapped in layers of yellowed cloth, was an envelope. A thick, heavy envelope. Mark handed it to me. "Go ahead." I took a deep breath and tore it open. And the moment I started reading, my blood ran cold. It was another will. A different will. One dated 2 years after the one Claire used to sell the house. And this one? It left everything to me. My hands were shaking. "This can't be real," I whispered. Mark crossed his arms. I thought the same thing. But I had a buddy of mine look at it. He's a lawyer. He says it looks official. My mind was spinning. Oh, How had this been hidden up here all this time? And then it hit me. Claire. She was the one who went through Grandma's paperwork. She was the one who handled everything after she passed. She must have found this will. She knew. She knew Grandma had changed her mind and left everything to me. And instead of telling me, she hid it. She lied. She sold the house and took all the money, knowing it wasn't hers to take. I felt sick. Mark must have seen the look on my face because he cleared his throat. Look, I don't know the whole story. But if this will is real, what she did, that's fraud. I swallowed hard. My voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, it is. That night I didn't sleep. I spent hours reading through the will, taking pictures, sending them to my lawyer. At 6 a.m. he called me. His voice was serious. This is real. And if your sister knew about it and still sold the house, she's in deep trouble. I barely heard the rest of what he said, because my hands were already dialing Claire's number. She answered on the fourth ring, groggy and annoyed. What do you want? I took a deep breath. You knew, I said. Silence. Then a fake laugh. Knew what? I clenched my jaw. Grandma's real will. More silence. Then, in a cold, flat voice, she said the one thing that made my blood boil. Prove it. I hung up, because I was about to do exactly that. And this time, Claire wasn't going to get away with it. I didn't hesitate. The moment I hung up on Claire, I sent every piece of evidence to my lawyer. The photos of the newly discovered will, the scanned documents, the timestamps, everything. I wasn't going to give her a chance to weasel her way out of this. Within minutes, my lawyer called me back, his tone sharper than usual. This changes everything, he said. If Claire knew about this will and still went ahead with the sale, she's committed fraud. You have a strong case. I knew that already, but hearing it out loud made it real. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a crime. So what do we do? I asked, pacing back and forth. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. We file a lawsuit, he said firmly. We bring this to court. If Mark, the buyer, is on board, we might even be able to reverse the sale and get the house back. That made my stomach twist. Claire had stolen from me and now I had a way to take it all back. I had proof. I had the law on my side. But then, for a split second, something inside me hesitated. Because as much as I hated her, as much as I wanted her to pay for what she did, Claire was still my sister. But then I thought about what she had done. She didn't just make a mistake. She didn't just forget about the real will. She had found it, read it, and buried it. She had chosen to lie. She had chosen to steal. And when I confronted her, she laughed in my face. No, she didn't deserve my hesitation. She didn't deserve my guilt. File the lawsuit, I said. I could almost hear the satisfaction in my lawyer's voice. Good choice, he said. And don't worry. Once we hit her with this, she won't be the one laughing. I exhaled slowly, letting my rage settle into something steadier. Something colder. Claire thought she had won. She had no idea the war had just begun. 2 days later, Claire called me. I knew she would. The moment she got served with the legal papers, I could feel her rage from miles away. I didn't pick up at first. Let her sweat. Let her realize that for once she wasn't in control. The third time my phone rang, I finally answered. The second I said, "Hello," she exploded. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You have no right to do this." I didn't say anything. I let her go off, let her spew every excuse, every insult, every pathetic attempt at making me the bad guy. This is a family matter, not a legal issue. You're seriously dragging lawyers into this? Are you insane? I stayed quiet, waiting. You are ruining my life, she shrieked. Do you get that? You're destroying everything. She was unraveling. I could hear it in her voice. Claire, the one who always had a backup plan, always had a lie ready, she was panicking. Good. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke. No right. I said, my voice calm. Too calm. You stole from me. You lied. You knew Grandma left me the house and you still sold it. So yeah, Claire, I have every right. Silence. For a second I thought she had hung up. Then she let out a bitter, forced laugh. You think you're so smart, don't you? She sneered. You actually think you can win. I don't think, Claire. I know. More silence. I could almost hear her mind racing, scrambling for a way out. But this time she had no escape. Well, guess what? She spat. You're never getting that house back. Never. I smiled even though she couldn't see it. We'll see about that. Then, without waiting for a response, I hung up. Let her sit with that. Let her feel what it was like to lose control for once. She thought this was over. She had no idea. I was just getting started. Filing the lawsuit was easier than I thought. My lawyer wasted no time. Within days he had gathered everything, copies of both wills, timestamps proving the real one was signed later, witness testimonies, even emails from Claire that hinted she had full knowledge of what she was doing. We had her. And when Claire was officially served with the lawsuit, she completely lost it. At first she sent me texts. Long, angry paragraphs filled with blame, accusations, and pathetic attempts to manipulate me. You're ruining my life. This is all a misunderstanding. We're family. Just drop this, okay? I ignored every single one. So she switched tactics. Suddenly she wasn't angry anymore. Suddenly she was playing the victim. Please, can we just talk? I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to do what was best for both of us. I almost laughed. She really thought she could talk her way out of this? I stayed silent. And that's when she did something predictable. She tried to buy me off. What if I give you some of the money? She texted. Not all of it, but enough to make things right. We don't have to go to court. We can settle this between us. I stared at my phone, shaking my head. She really thought I was stupid enough to let her negotiate her way out of a crime? I didn't reply. Because while she was desperately texting me, my lawyer was digging deeper. And what he found? It made everything so much worse for her. Claire hadn't just hidden one will. She had forged the will she used to sell the house. Fake signature. Fake witnesses. Fake everything. The moment my lawyer called me with the news, I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. She didn't just hide the real will, he told me. She actually created a fake one to make sure she got everything. I gripped the phone tighter. You're telling me she didn't just ignore the real will? She actually forged a fake one? Yep. And that, my friend, is a whole different level of fraud. My hands curled into fists. She's going to jail, isn't she? If you push this? Well, yeah. This isn't just a lawsuit anymore. This is criminal. For the first time since this all started, I actually felt bad for her. But then I remembered how she smirked at me, how she told me I'd never see a dime. And just like that, the sympathy was gone. She had done this to herself. And now, she was going to pay. When Claire realized she was losing, she panicked. She had always been able to talk her way out of trouble, always managed to manipulate people into believing she was the victim. But this time, she had no way out. Or so I thought. Instead of complying with the court order to return the money, she moved it. She transferred funds into offshore accounts, spread it across multiple small transactions, and even put some under a friend's name to make it look like she was broke. My lawyer called me immediately. She's trying to hide the money, he said. She thinks if she makes it look like she has nothing left, the court won't force her to pay. I clenched my jaw. So what do? We set a trap. And that's exactly what we did. I called Claire, acting defeated. I told her I just wanted to talk, to understand how she pulled it off. And because she couldn't help herself, she bragged. She spilled everything, where she moved the money, who helped her, how she made it look like she had nothing left. She thought she was winning. She had no idea I was recording the entire conversation. This wasn't just fraud anymore. No, she was facing prison. I sent the recording to my lawyer that same night. By 6 a.m. my phone was ringing. This is it, he said the moment I answered. This is what buries her. I already knew that. But hearing it out loud made it real. There was no escape for Claire this time. No loophole, no manipulation, no last-minute save. She had walked herself straight into a legal disaster, and now she was about to face the consequences. We filed the final charges that morning. Fraud, perjury, and money laundering. It was no longer just about reversing the sale of the house. Claire was looking at real prison time. And I wanted to be there when she realized it. The day of the hearing, Claire walked into the courtroom with fake confidence, head held high like she still believed she could talk her way out of this. Like she still thought she was the smartest person in the room. But that confidence shattered when my lawyer pressed play on the recording. Her own voice echoed through the courtroom. She was laughing, bragging, explaining in explicit detail how she moved the money, how she manipulated the system, how she planned to walk away without consequences. And the second the judge heard it, I watched Claire go pale. Her hands clenched into fists on the table. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to object, like she wanted to lie her way out one last time. But there was nothing she could say. The proof was right there in her own words. The judge turned to her. "Miss Claire, do you have anything to say before I make my ruling?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked around searching for some kind of escape. But there was none. For the first time in her life, Claire had nowhere to run. The weight of it hit her all at once. Her entire face crumbled. The reality that she wasn't just losing a lawsuit, she was losing everything, finally sank in. And I just sat there watching it happen. She had destroyed my life without a second thought. Now, she was watching herself fall apart. The judge didn't waste time. "Miss Claire," he said, his tone sharp, firm, unshakable. "Not only did you knowingly commit fraud by selling property that was never legally yours, but you also attempted to cover up your crime by laundering money." Claire sat frozen. The courtroom was dead silent. "You forged documents," the judge continued, flipping through the stack of evidence in front of him. "You fabricated witness signatures. You knowingly and deliberately obstructed justice at every turn." I leaned back, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. This was what justice felt like. "Therefore," the judge said, glancing at Claire with a cold, unwavering stare, "this court finds you guilty of fraud, perjury, and money laundering. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison." Claire gasped like someone had just punched the air out of her lungs. "No, no, you can't do this." She turned, frantic, looking for someone, anyone, to help her. But there was no one left on her side. The judge didn't even blink. "This court is adjourned." The gavel hit. It was final. And just like that, Claire's entire world collapsed. She turned to me, eyes wide, filled with rage, disbelief, desperation. "You did this to me," she hissed. You ruined my life." I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. Then I shrugged. "Funny," I said, completely calm. "I was about to say the same thing to you." That's when the guards moved in. She jerked back as they reached for her, trying to fight them off, trying to scream her way out of it, but there was no escape. This was happening. I sat there and watched. Claire had taken everything from me. She had lied, cheated, manipulated, and never once thought about the consequences. Now, she was finally paying the price. As she was dragged away, I saw it, the exact moment she broke. Her face twisted in pure panic, her body slumped, her breath shaky. She knew. She wasn't getting out of this. And for the first time she was terrified. The door shut behind her. The courtroom emptied. I exhaled slowly, letting everything settle in. It was over. Or at least that's what I thought. But Claire? She wasn't done screwing me over just yet. The judge didn't waste time. His voice was firm, his decision already made. Claire sat there, hands gripping the table, her face pale as he spoke. She wasn't in control anymore. "Miss Claire, not only did you knowingly commit fraud by selling property that was never legally yours, but you also attempted to cover up your crime by laundering money," he said, flipping through the documents. "You forged legal documents, fabricated witness signatures, and knowingly obstructed justice at every turn." The weight of his words hit her like a brick. Her whole body stiffened, her breathing uneven. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Therefore, this court finds you guilty of fraud, perjury, and money laundering. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison." The words rang through the courtroom like a death sentence. Claire gasped, her face draining of color. She turned to the judge, then to me, her eyes wide with desperation. "No, no, you can't do this." Her voice cracked, hysteria creeping in. She looked around the courtroom like a trapped animal, searching for someone, anyone to help her. But there was no one left. The judge barely even looked at her. This court is adjourned. The gavel hit. It was final. Claire turned to me, eyes filled with fury. You did this to me. You ruined my life. Her voice was shaking, but it wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. I just looked at her. Funny. I was about to say the same thing to you. The guards moved toward her. The moment they reached for her arms, she snapped. She jerked back, trying to fight them off, trying to twist out of their grip, but it was useless. She screamed, but no one cared. She wasn't the victim here. I didn't move. I didn't say another word. I just sat there and watched as she was dragged away, her shouts echoing down the hall. The same way she had stolen everything from me, I had taken it all back. And just before she disappeared, I saw it, the exact moment she broke. Her face twisted, her body slumped, her breath shaky. She knew. This wasn't something she could talk her way out of. She wasn't getting away with it this time. And for the first time in her life, Claire was terrified. The doors slammed shut behind her. The courtroom emptied. I let out a long breath, feeling the weight of everything finally lift. It was over. She was gone. Justice was served. I should have felt relief. I should have felt peace. But Claire wasn't done screwing me over just yet. I thought it was over. Claire was in prison. Justice had been served. The house was mine again. She had lost and I had won. But just when I started to move on, my lawyer called me with news that stopped me in my tracks. We looked deeper into Claire's financial records, he said. Turns out she wasn't working alone. I frowned. What do you mean? She had help. For a second I thought I misheard him. Help? Yeah, he continued. Someone else was involved in setting up the offshore accounts, moving the money, and making sure everything looked legitimate. Someone who knew exactly how to keep stolen money hidden. I already knew the answer before he said it. Amanda, I muttered. Claire's best friend. Her partner in crime. The one person who had been in her corner this whole time. My lawyer didn't even hesitate. We have transaction records, email exchanges, even texts between them talking about shifting the money before the court order came down. Amanda wasn't just helping her, she was the one pulling the strings. It all made sense now. Claire was a liar, a manipulator, but she wasn't smart enough to pull off something this big on her own. She needed someone with experience, someone who knew how to play the system. And now that someone was about to go down with her, I took a deep breath. What do we do next? We turn it over to the authorities. If Amanda was involved, she's just as guilty. Claire thought she lost everything already, but this is going to destroy her. I had spent so much time thinking Claire was the mastermind, but she was just the face of the scam. Amanda had been in the background, pulling the strings, making sure everything was cleaned up just enough to keep Claire from getting caught. But she hadn't cleaned up everything. And just when Claire thought she had nothing left to lose, she was about to watch the only person who had ever stood by her go down too. I thought I had already seen Claire hit rock bottom. I was wrong. She still had further to fall. Amanda didn't stand a chance. The moment the authorities confronted her, she cracked like cheap glass. She didn't just admit to everything, she turned on Claire completely. She gave them everything they needed, every bank record, every shady transaction, every fake document she had helped create. And then she went even further. She exposed Claire's other scams. The fake investment deals. The unpaid debts. The phony loans she had taken out under false pretenses. Things I hadn't even known about. Turns out, Claire had been running scams for years, and Amanda had been right there beside her, covering her tracks. So Claire's 5-year sentence? It doubled. Now, she wasn't just serving time for what she did to me, she was facing 10 years behind bars for an entire lifetime of fraud. And the best part? She had to sit in that prison cell knowing that while she lost everything, I had won. No money. No allies. No way out. For once in her life, Claire had nothing left to steal. And for the first time, I finally had peace. Claire was gone. 10 years in prison. No money. No escape. No one left to bail her out. She had spent her whole life lying, cheating, and manipulating everyone around her, convinced she would always land on her feet. Not this time. I got my grandmother's house back. I restored it, fixed everything Claire had ignored, and made sure every single memory she tried to erase remained untouched. The house that she stole from me? Now it was legally, permanently mine. And Claire? She had to sit in a prison cell, knowing that while she had lost everything, I had won. She wrote me a letter once. Some pathetic attempt at an apology. Said she had changed, that she was sorry, that she hoped we could be family again. I didn't even open it. I sent it back unread. Because Claire wasn't worth my time anymore. She thought she could steal from me and walk away without consequences. She thought she could rewrite the past and get away with it. She was wrong. In the end, karma always collects its debts. And I made sure she paid in full. The end.